not to discount 50% improvement, but I've seen data that you've shared in different stops, different organizations that you've been a part of, showing closer to, say, 90 or 95% reduction in, for example, CLABSI rates. I'm curious to hear your thoughts on celebrating 50% improvement while recognizing there are pockets where we have and can do much better.
Yeah, so let me take the 30,000-foot view that was presented in Harlan Krumholtz's study in JAMA, calling attention to this I think important improvement that we've seen, and then sort of do what we do, which is distill it down to so rather than looking out the window at these aggregated data, what does it look like at Duke? Right. So the first thing I did when you sent me that last night was ask the question, okay, if I look at the adverse events listed in that study and I look at Duke in 2022, fiscal year 2022, and ask the question, what is our rate of adverse event? Now, I didn't pick 5 categories. I just said, take all of our adverse events, pressure injuries, medication errors, falls, C. diff, whatever, in that category, and look across the 138,000 discharges and try and do a quick back of the envelope calculation. We are at 8 per 1,000 discharges at Duke. So, that's not zero,
Sure.
but that's better than we were pre-pandemic, where, we saw, I would say we'd seen about a 33% improvement over the last 3 years. I'm sorry, prior to the pandemic, about a 33% year over year improvement. And then that rate of change did slow during the pandemic. But, I think what each place has to do when you see those data is go look at your own data. Stop having conversations around the aggregate. Say, okay, if that's the national story, what's the story at Duke? If that's the national story, what's the story at UNC? And each leader should then look at their own data and say, okay, how are we doing? Now, you shouldn't feel good necessarily that you're better than those numbers, right? What you should feel good about is, are you seeing year over year improvement? So yes, I think benchmark from a public reporting perspective is important, but for an institutional perspective, are you getting better? So, that's kind of the way I would argue a leader in a healthcare organization has to look at data like that, and say, okay, how do I shape up? So that's the way I would urge every healthcare leader to look at the data.
Yeah.
Now, we're not going to go out and run a news ad and say, hey, we're better than the JAMA article. But what we're going to say, okay, is how do we get here, and how do we continue that kind of improvement?